Welcome back to Unirunner Video Drum Lessons for January 4th, 2007. Glad you could tune in. And this week I'm going to be talking about learning your favorite drum licks and some of the ways that you can do that, and the way I approach it, at least with one piece of music, because I got an email here from Peter in South Pasadena. He says he's really old, he's 35, and he said he started playing 2 years ago and that the podcast has helped. He says, or he asks the question, he learned to play guitar by learning songs and riffs that he loved from teachers, friends, and occasionally by ear. He says, I practiced along to records and made great improvements that way. Any chance you could take some classic drum parts and break them down into bite-sized pieces, Led Zeppelin's Rock and Roll or something with that feel would be greatly appreciated. Thanks so much. Well, thanks for your email, Peter. And by the way, in case you've sent in a question that I haven't got to, usually I will take the ones that I feel I know the most about and address those usually first, because I'm not sure how long I'll be doing the podcast, and I want to address the questions that I feel I know something about the best. And with this rock and roll question, I'm really familiar with that song, Led Zeppelin's Rock and Roll, and I always like the intro. It's one of the most recognizable, probably, drum licks in drum history. It's off of Led Zeppelin 4, and it's right at the beginning. It's like do 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 do. But I've never bothered to really break it down and try and learn how to play it or transcribe it. So I took Peter's challenge to do that. So I'll play the lick here for you. I'll show you how I went about learning that lick. So if you look on the screen here, I've transcribed it out. If you listen to the record, you hear this kind of pulse. So basically the whole intro, he plays just on the snare and the hi-hat. It's this eighth note pulse. So it was just a matter of figuring out where the pulse was. But then towards the end, he does something tricky, which gets into a different time signature. So I transcribed it out as a measure of 7/8 in there. So I'll play it here real slow from the top. So when I transcribed that, I had kind of a tricky ending because it didn't fit into a typical 4 pattern. So I knew there was some sort of odd time or something going on in there. But the whole thing does have an 8th note pulse. So if you just wrote out a bunch of 8th notes and one note after another in a straight line across and just put accents over, you could probably figure out how to play that lick, because you can tell where the accents are. But I wanted to take it a step further and transcribe it into actual measures and figure out where the odd time was and whatnot. So the secret weapon of a lot of transcribers and people who write out music, and if you want to learn your favorite drum licks, I recommend downloading the software. It's called The Amazing Slowdowner, and I'll put a link to that on my webpage, or on the podcast for the listing for today's podcast. I'll put a link for The Amazing Slowdowner, and if you go to that site and download the software, it's really cool. You can run it off a CD or a file and slow it down incrementally. Check it out. I mean, you can get it really slow, and that's after I went through and transcribed what I thought Bonham was playing. I used it to kind of double check to make sure had all the notes in place. That would be one way you could just listen to it over and over, and if you want to slow it down with the Amazing Slowdowner or software like that, you could do that to figure out your favorite drum licks. Like I said, I took it this step further and wrote it out. So if you look at that on the screen, you've got 2 measures of 4/4, actually 3 measures of 4/4, followed by a measure of 2/4, followed by a measure of 7/8, which ends with a measure of 4/4, which is where the main groove starts, where the backbeat do-do-cha, 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 right where they start with the main guitar riff. So if you look at the accent pattern at the top, I'll count it out, and the accents that look like rooftops, that are vertical accents, those are going to be slightly louder, or going to be loud, and then the accents that are horizontal, that look like alligators, they're going to be a little bit quieter. So I'll just play the pattern on my practice pad here so you can hear. And I'll count it out. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. So that last measure is kind of the tricky one, because I could hear them building there, kind of a crescendo, which is marked by that kind of those two lines that intersect at the bottom that look like an alligator mouth opening. So the very last accent of the pattern, if you listen to the pattern, so that very last accent is the beginning of the 7/8 measure. So so if you count that, a good way to learn the lick is to think of that last accent you hear right before the build, where it goes ba 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 ba, is the beginning of the 7/8 measure. So just start counting from 1 to 7. The 8th count of that is actually going to be the downbeat of your next measure, where you start the groove in 4/4. So the last measure, that 7/8, comes into it with that accent pattern. Ba da ba ba da ba 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 So that that downbeat is your 1 of the 4/4 groove. So I'll play it again here in its entirety.
You've been watching Unirunner Video Drum Lessons. You can visit Unirunner on the web at www.unirunner.com. Until next time, keep practicing, and God bless.